Do you ever have a friend that shows up late to every single event you go to? Up until a few months ago, I never viewed myself as a punctual person, and I never knew why, even when I gave myself plenty of time. Today we're going to be discussing how ADHD affects someone's life. Typically, someone who has ADHD can be considered lazy or that they don't care about their priorities, whether it comes to school, work, or their personal life. They can be told that they need to work harder, but they're already working at full speed. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder and can also be known as executive dysfunction. Medically, it is the dysregulation of the dopamine system. In the frontal lobe, these brain sections either contain too little dopamine, it's not being used properly, or there's not enough receptors. These frontal lobe sections mature slower, and they're responsible for concentration, attention, planning, and impulse control. If I get asked to do something, I either completely push it off or do it immediately. I'll tell myself that I'll do it later, I'll take care of it tomorrow, or that I don't need a reminder to do it. The now versus later thought process is a dangerous cycle for chronic procrastinators. If I view something as later, whether it's 5 minutes from now or 5 days from now, it's categorized the same way, as in not now. There are 7 different types of ADHD that also include non-hyperactive ADD. I was recently diagnosed with a form of inattentive ADHD, and I'm learning to manage it through behavioral therapy and medication. I want to help educate and move forward from the stigma that is presented with all topics surrounding ADHD. Often, there's a late diagnosis of non-hyperactive ADD, especially in women. Someone you love or know may have symptoms but aren't recognized, and recognition and early treatment can help avoid problems that pertain to relationships and in your profession. First, let us look at how ADHD affects eating habits. A lot of people with ADHD have a complicated relationship with food. Either they undereat, overeat, or both. They may just forget because another task gets pushed forward in their mind, which goes back to the now versus later. It can result in binge eating to make up for that day. Inadequate planning, like shopping and meal planning, can contribute to these unhealthy habits. Walden Behavioral Care states that those with ADHD may be particularly likely to forget to eat and to binge later, or they may have trouble planning and shopping ahead, which can result in spur-of-the-moment and uncontrolled eating. Time-managed eating improves focus and energy and helps you separate them into time blocks. This increases staying on track of schedule, inviting proper hunger cues, and avoiding hyper-focusing that can mess up your schedule. Now that we've seen how improper time management can affect eating habits, we can turn our attention to dealing with everyday priorities as someone with ADHD. There are certain activities that have no actual timeline or deadline, which take a lot more mental energy and time to prepare and complete. An example of this is hygiene. For most people, daily hygiene is non-negotiable, but people with ADHD may view it as a chore. Keeping it scheduled into your day is the best way to deal with this. Similar to hygiene, clutter or cleaning up your room can also be put off, as unless there's a special event, it may not be very prioritized. When it comes to working, being at a job or school, understanding how long things take to do is crucial. You can do the same task every day and know how long it takes, but keeping it in that time frame every single time can be challenging. It can lead to poor grades, high stress and anxiety levels, and possible unemployment. Even when you do have a deadline, knowing when you have to finish it by, you end up doing it last minute and always feel behind. Not only does ADHD impact eating habits and dealing with priorities, but it also affects communication. You may have a friend who has ADHD who isn't texting back, and there could be a possible couple reasons for it. People with ADHD have rejection sensitivity and may also have a struggle with processing tone. This can lead to pushing off responding because of their nerves, understanding the message in general, or a combination. So you may get a delayed communication with them or none at all. Making time for others when it's friends, family, or appointments is a struggle when it comes to scheduling with a daily disorganized schedule. You may have lunch plans with a friend that you will forget unless you're constantly reminded. The organization Very Well Mind states that the brain processes time differently in those with ADHD. Sometimes it's the impaired sense of time that leads to problems with getting tasks started. If you have trouble estimating the time it takes to complete a task, you might put it off, thinking you're allowing enough time to get it done. There are many strategies that are beneficial for everyone with and without ADHD. You can add buffer time or do calendar blocking. Calendar blocking is a prominent strategy to separate your day into tasks. It can be tedious, but long-term very beneficial. Typically, it is used for a weekly schedule, and those with ADHD have long-term benefits. Now let's review what we have learned. Managing eating habits as someone with ADHD can be very difficult. It can get put off and can result in binge eating. Taking care of yourself and your high-priority tasks are also affected and can result in unnecessary stress and anxiety. Finally, keeping constant communication relating to jobs, events, and personal relationships are a struggle, as you have to focus on the task at hand always. Although ADHD is very common nowadays, it is either underrepresented or extremely misrepresented. And we want to take away the stigma behind the treatment for it. Next time one of your friends shows up late, take into consideration the time and energy it took for them to prioritize the quality time with you as a loved one. And I encourage you to educate yourself on the positives and negatives of it, as well as learning how to support those with the diagnosis.